So there hasn't been any UFC this weekend, but there is a few fight nights on the build up to UFC 280. But a big problem is these fight nights are terrible. They're absolutely awful. I could not care about them in the slightest. Is there any fights at all coming up, Mark, before 280 that you're interested in at all?
To be honest, not so much. No, I'm probably sounding like the filthy casual fan right now because I am. But like when you look through a fight night card and you think, well, is there anyone of interest? Or sometimes they put an old veteran on there, like Andrei Arlovsky. He appears a lot on fight nights. And you're like, oh, I might tune in for that one, but there's nothing of interest. No. It's one of them where you'd have it on. It's like if you have Only Fools and Horses on in the background as you're watching, as you're doing other things. You're not actually invested in it. For you, the time in the UK, I don't think you'll be setting any alarms.
Definitely not. I will not be getting up for any of these fight nights. I was quite interested in Cody Garbrandt fighting, but I forget who he was fighting, but he was injured, and then so they were going to get a last minute replacement for Cody, but they couldn't seem to find one, and that's fair enough. But I wonder, do we complain too much, sort of, about fight nights and things like that, or is it just a case of that we get spoilt too much? Because we were talking about UFC Paris, and we're like, oh, why is Robert Whittaker and Marvin Vettori on a random fight night? They should be on UFC 280, or 279. That's what we originally said they should be on. But then, it kind of counteracts that, doesn't it? Because now we're hungry for some decent fights, and it's a shame, really. But I guess it allows, stars to shine. Say if you're bored on Saturday, think, oh, I'll watch the fight night, and then you really get into Mackenzie Dern versus Yan Xiaonan, which seems very unlikely, but it might happen, and it might build some stars.
Well, I think it is. You're right in what you're saying, that we're just getting a bit spoiled, because every single actual UFC event and the odd fight night, like say UFC Fight Night Paris, they're all so good. And this fight night, next weekend with Mackenzie Dern, it might actually be a cracker. When you're least expecting it, it might actually be brilliant. But when it's placed that close to 280, you're like, or like, big events in general, you just feel it just feels lackluster and a bit like, would I really be bothered? I don't know. It's just like comparing apples and oranges, really, with the quality and how much you're looking forward. The only thing that could go for it, I mean, I've done it before, like, especially being over here in New Zealand, if you've got nothing else on and you just end up sticking a fight night on, and you end up seeing some big knockouts or some big victories and that kind of thing, and you're pleasantly surprised because you're not invested, and then obviously it draws you in. Yeah. And that's where the UFC have got me exactly where they want me.
Well, it happened before, didn't it? It was the Curtis Blades fight night. I wasn't going to stay up for that, and I was like, oh, I'm already up. I'll watch it. I'll at least watch the prelims, and I really got into it. It turned out to be a really good card, and sometimes there can be these little hidden gems, and I'm really hoping that there are some really good fights, coming up, but it just doesn't feel like there is. And then there's Alexa Grasso versus Vivian Arajo. I've never even heard of her before. I'm exposing myself as a filthy casual, I know, but I really haven't. And you think, what? That's your main event for a fight night? Who's tuning in for that? That seems a very poor marketing decision by the UFC. Maybe they're relying too much on 280. Maybe they think, right, we've got this massive card at the end of the month. Everyone can just relax. They're not bothered. We don't need to pump too much into it.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, no doubt people like you said about filthy casuals and stuff, but I almost don't envy the people who know every single fighter on the roster, because you think, like, do you not have hobbies? Do you not, like, you sit in. But I must admit, though, when it's I'd hate to say poor fight nights, but when it's fight nights that I'm not interested in, I get my Sunday back. Like I said, 280, I'll be there throughout the entire day watching the prelims, early prelims, everything right up to the main event. And that's my Sunday activity. But, next weekend, well, I'll be extremely hungover from my birthday. But, like, it's not a hungover thing. I've got my Sunday, I can do what I want and go out for a walk, whatever, Yeah. But when I love that. Actually...
Have people not got hobbies? Well, I'm going to go for a walk on Sunday.
Yeah. I've got my train set. That's set up. I'm going to sit there playing Thomas. But it's just, you know what I mean? As in, like, obviously you can't really relate because you've got to get up for the fight nights typically.
Yeah.
But like, say for me, again, I'm never happy. I'm always complaining. It's on at a perfect time for me most of the time, and I'm still like saying, yeah, but it takes up my full day.
I wish it took up my full day rather than my full morning and middle of the night, Mark, and that'd be much better. But you know, it seems a bit unfair because other people who are into like other sports, if you're a football fan or I don't know, tennis fan or Formula One, you've got an event every weekend to watch, haven't you? As it feels like with MMA in general, it's a lot more difficult. It's sort of in between. But I guess, you know, there is things like Bellator and One Championship and stuff. But like you were saying before, it's hard to watch them all, isn't it? Because I did watch Bellator a little bit last night, but that's just because Yoel Romero was fighting. And it's just exciting to see big names like that. I find it mad he's 46 though. But yeah, with these sort of lack of fights, it brings attention to Bellator and things like that. Does it give you any interest to think, oh, I might tune in and watch this because there's no other fights on?
Yeah, I mean, it can do, but it does dwell into that. But just because I know what I'm like, if I ended up watching it and I found it that entertaining, I'd have to keep up with that as well. And I think, oh, it's just too much. I can't devote my life to it. But you honestly feel like we've spoke about it before with fight nights. Say, for example, this Mackenzie Dern card next week. It really, because it sometimes feels like, I know the UFC are cut happy, but they've got an abundance of fighters, and it feels like it gives them a chance to shine. You know, like this may put someone on the map.
Yeah.
You know, like did you see them? Because they can't 280 stacked, so you know they can't compete on that one, but they can compete on this one. You know, so it does feel like everyone's getting a chance.
Yeah,
but
definitely. And don't forget,
not
like,
everyone has to tune in.
yeah, definitely. And maybe because maybe there's something on us as well. Like, you know, perhaps we should be more invested because Dern versus Yan, the winner of that will probably fight Rose or the winner of Esparza and Zhang Wei Li. So it's essentially, you know, it is title picture involved. You know, it's a big fight for that division. And it seems a bit of a shame that we're not as invested in it. You know, because it does have such big stipulations involved, you know. But I do think that's all we've got time for. If you can like, comment, subscribe, it really does help us out.